If you're not successful, you're not going to be in this industry very long.
No.
So you got to get people to the finish line, not just down the path, but to the finish line. And look, I enjoy every part of it. I enjoy it so much that I didn't want to run Touchstone, right? Which is how Steve joined me, and then you joined us, and you run Touchstone now. And we, I like doing the deals. I like that's where to me, where the fun is.
Excellent. Well, for those of you that are just joining us, Jeff just gave us a great segue. We're doing a Meet the Partner episode with Jeffrey Rich, one of our 3 partners at Touchstone. So you enjoyed this component of it. What got you here?
Are you saying what's my history?
Like what's career path? Because you didn't have, you did do the financial bro component, right? Like you came with the finance degree.
Sure. So out of college, I was hired by, given a job offer by a firm on Wall Street called Cantor Fitzgerald. I did not take that job. I ended up over course of a couple of years coming to work on Wall Street, but in a different role as like an independent proprietary trader. And so that's where you go to a firm and they give you an amount of capital to steward and you trade it very actively. And if you make money, you get a percentage of that. And if you lose money, no paycheck and fired for you. So I did that.
Kill or be killed.
Kill or be killed. So it's kind of the ultimate form of capitalism. As a young person, I think it's really attractive because there's no cap on the income that you can make. And you're surrounded with a lot of other, people that are in most cases far more intelligent than I am, but really smart people. And, the ideas are just flowing, and it's the job that I wanted to do. And I got to do my life's dream at 24, 25, 26, 27 years old. That's pretty cool. Not many people get to do that.
No.
By 32, I was really done with it. It's a young man's game, I would say. Not that there's not a lot of older people who are really successful traders or portfolio managers, but there's definitely a negative emotional component on it. Over time, the good days feel less good, and the days when you lose money feel more bad. Uh-huh. And I think I kind of wore out emotionally on it. And so by the time I was in my early 30s, I was time for a change. I also had a view about the market that was correct but early, and correct but early means you're going to lose a lot of money. Mm. So it was 2007, end of 2006. I went and worked in the recession that I anticipated was coming in the insurance space. That was good for a variety of things. It definitely broadened me out. It was also the change of pace was marked from that high pace, high stress environment. Now you're in all the disasters happen extremely slowly
Fair.
Category. It was really good from a family perspective, et cetera. I did not find it very intellectually satisfying at all. And I was looking for a change. And I found the founder of Touchstone, Mike Camerata, who, had started to build a small mergers and acquisitions company in Northern Connecticut. And Mike took a shine to me because I reminded him of his son, who went to the same college that I went to, but he couldn't work with his son. His son and he had different ideas. And so I sort of became Mike's putative son. And so it was kind of Mike and son for a couple of years, and Roy joined us, as you remember, and then Steve joined us, and others along the way, and then you joined us, and others since. And so Mike really wanted to build a firm, and but he needed somebody to do the work of selling the companies because he didn't really want to do that anymore. And so he built the firm, I sold the companies, and then he brought in more people to sell the companies, and it sort of went from there. Yeah. So I've been with Touchstone now close to 15 years. I guess I'm the longest dated employee.
I think you are.
I think I am.
I think you are.
But planning on being here at least another 15 unless
You better
somebody
be.
wants to get rid of me.
We're not getting rid of you. Nope. Keep closing the deals. So you are not only someone that likes to close the deals, you actually acquired a company from someone else within the firm.
I did. He regrets it ever since. Yes, he was selling a small company. At the time, I was looking for a small company to buy. And we bought it. We've owned it for about 10 years. It's been a really good investment for us. I think if we were to exit the company, I think we would return something like 30 times the initial investment we made on it. So that's been
That's a healthy
positive.
growth.
Continues to pay dividends for us. I also have a logistics startup that we are working on that I'm the majority owner of, and a couple other businesses that I'm involved with as an investor, mostly in the sort of startup realm, either software or medical devices.
Yeah. So it's safe to say that you like working with owners because you are one.
I do think that there's a little bit of the tribe mentality. I think most people who are our owners would not want to have to go back to working for somebody else. I think there is an autonomy from a decision-making perspective that I think is important. And one thing that I did realize at the insurance companies that I worked with, which were really, really big, companies with thousands of employees and really a bad fit for me, is that I would always do my best when I was just talking with the decision maker at the company, either the CEO of the company that I work for or the, the CFOs or CEOs of the companies that, we were administering insurance for. It's just, for me, a lot easier to just cut through and speak directly, candidly, good, bad, or indifferent. And I like that. I do like, I think, to get sort of beyond some of the red tape and just get to the point where decisions can be made, because in the decisions is, I think, where progress happens.
That makes sense. So one of the things that I've noticed working both with you and with Steve is that you read businesses differently.
Okay.
So you tend to come from a financial standpoint. Yeah. So talk a little bit about how financials impact planning for an exit.
Sure. It's true. I can't help it. That Wall Street background and CFA charter holder background does cause me to look at things probably less operationally initially than you do and Steve does, and more from the financial perspective. I will say that I can read an income statement or a balance sheet and tell you many things about how the operations are running, including probably how your organization from a organizational standpoint is set up, whether people are happy, whether they're not. You can tell a lot just from reading financial fluently, but I'm typically more focused on the bottom line and like what it is and what we need to do to make it better, and probably less astute when it comes to some of the, like, we know, Deb, marketing's not my thing, right?
Fair.
I'm going to be more focused on what we need to do to drive the financials forward and less on some of the operational or softer sides of it.
Yeah, very fair. And that's one of the reasons that at Touchstone we work as a team.
That's right.
Right. So, our advisors come from different vantage points, and pairing them appropriately gives the clients the best.
That was one of the things that I think was a really important change that Touchstone made along the way, from going sort of as a solo entrepreneur on every deal, right? Maybe supported a little bit by back office, to really bringing a team to the table. I think that's something that's important. I think it's also a differentiator. There's a lot of sole practitioners who are really good, but they can only be one place at once. They might be, and one of those places might be a needed vacation or
every now and then
sleep every once in a while. I think allowing for some specialization, thinking of Joe from our team, who's such a unique resource, in the finance space,
Correct.
but just others, to allow people to specialize somewhat, I think helps drive a better overall experience for the business owners that are looking to exit.
Agreed. Agreed. It's something that we do quite well, is getting the right parties on the deal. Talk a little bit about the difficulties within a transaction time. Where do you see hiccups the most frequently?
Okay. Well, I do think I was at a conference last week that we belong to, with a lot of other M&A and advisors and investment bankers, both nationally and internationally. And one of our friends there said something that I think is very true, which is it's harder than ever to get deals over the finish line. And it's easy to bring them in and to sign them up as clients, right? There's a lot of people, demographics, whatever. There's a lot of people that are looking to exit their business. But so many of them are taken off track along the way by either known or unknown factors, right?
Mhm.
Exogenous or endogenous factors. And you can't do anything about the things you couldn't plan for, like, I don't know, Trump tariffs, which is definitely creating some issues for
It is.
some of our prospective clients or clients that would like to come to market that are dealing with those. You can't you can't do anything about what happened to us, I think, in 2011, where we had a closing scheduled for a business being acquired by a Japanese company, and the Japanese were coming to sign the paperwork. They get off on the tarmac at Bradley Airport and find out they have to go back because there's been an earthquake and what turned into the Fukushima nuclear crisis. You can't do anything about those things.
No.
But there are a lot of things that you can, although I would say there is one thing that you can do about them. Probably the truest adage within the M&A business is that time kills all deals. So if you're a tech business, right, and like people are more attuned to it, I think, in technology, that you're everywhere and always in a race. And if you don't think you're in a race, like
You lost.
You lost. You just don't know you lost
Right.
yet. Exactly. So, but over a long enough period of time, a bad thing will happen. And it will torpedo a deal. Either it will happen to your prospective acquirer, or it'll happen to you as the party looking to exit your business. So we've adopted this sort of measure twice, cut once approach, as you well know. And we go through and we're really careful to try to go through and understand what the good is, of course, of the business, but what is the bad and the ugly, right? Where are we a little bit undressed? Where do we need to get ourselves from the business perspective? Is it, to talk about financials, is it our financial reporting, right? Do we have a sales problem? Do we have an owner dependency problem? Do we have a succession issue? Do we have minority shareholders who don't agree, right? Who could torpedo a deal if they're not treated or brought, kept in the loop appropriately? There's a lot of different factors that have to be evaluated. And, I think that if you do those, try to address as many of those before you go to market as possible. That's the best way to try to avoid hiccups between, say, a letter of intent and a closing.
Yeah. So how, and we've touched on it a little bit, but how long do you see a transaction like actually happening these days?
Okay, so I think it's getting longer overall. I think buyers are very worried about making a mistake, spending money on due diligence, not to get to the finish line. What does the seller or their investment banker or M&A advisor know that I don't know? That information asymmetry, right? I think that they're more cautious about that, a little more suspicious, just generally. I feel like everybody is a little bit more after COVID, a little shorter with the, with their, with the sense of grace that you give another party, right, that you're working with. But I think it's a situation where I guess the biggest issue that I see between the signing, even the signing of letters of intent takes a lot longer than it used to. We've always, that's one of the things where we always take a little bit more time than some people. We really we want to make sure we have a deal at the LOI stage. We don't just want to sign them up and then find out 2 months later that there are all sorts of rats running around that we could have figured out and realized that this wasn't the right fit, buyer to seller, just not the right alignment. So we take more time than most. But even that process takes longer, I think, for us many times than it used to.
Lately, I've noticed the same, right? Everybody wants to agree, but nobody wants to incur a cost to agree. And nobody necessarily wants to meet in the middle to agree. They just want you to agree with them.
Yes. And I do think that buyers are a little bit more, I think they're pickier about what constitutes success for them. And I think the buyer community is also a little more unyielding in terms of, like I've always said, deals either close or don't close about whether people get jerky over the last several percent of the deal price.
Right. Well, that was the very first deal that I worked with you on.
That's right.
And we gave up.
You want to tell that story?
Yeah, we gave up. We got down to the finish line and we were arguing over $1,000.
Was it 1,000 or two?
No, it was
two.
No, we had gotten them to agree, and it was down to it because it was a $3,000 bill, and they're like, "We'll each pay $1,000," and I'm like, "Good, there's a third left." So we gave up $1,000 of our fee, which was the people getting the least out of the deal,
yes,
right?
Of course.
And it changed the dynamic of the entire room. Because we gave up a fee and they both felt quite silly.
And I think a lot of times it does come down to people getting emotionally anchored into their position and just starting to, I think that's one of the biggest reasons to hire an M&A advisor and an investment banker, whether it be Touchstone or somebody else, is to put on my old Boston accent, to be the buffer, right? To go bone on bone throughout a transaction, look, you're
going to hate each other by the end of it.
And God forbid one of them has to stay and work for the other.
Correct.
It's never going to happen. So, I can think of a couple transactions right now where my buyer and my seller don't necessarily like or trust each other that much, but they trust us, right? They trust that we're running a fair process, that we are going to be, even though we're advocating, traditionally on the sell side, we're advocating for the benefit of our clients as we have to from a fiduciary perspective, that we're not just taking everything to the brink, right? That it's not like that there's an understanding that in order to win the war, you lose some battles along the way, and that a really good deal is probably one where everybody walks away from the table mostly happy, but a little bit unhappy about certain things. Yeah. And that if you just dominate the other party, even if you win and get the deal to the finish line, the question is, what is the cost on the other side? Is that seller who got dominated by a buyer and just beaten into submission through deal fatigue or whatever, are they going to give you what you need post-closing? Are they going to, if there's an area of expertise, for example, and you've paid them, they may not bother to pay any attention to you after the closing. So I don't know. Yeah. It's my thought.
Agreed. And I think we play a role in avoiding a lot of those scenarios. And it's why it's not unusual for us to sell a business the first time and then sell it again when
5, 6, 7 years later, when they're ready for
they're ready for an exit the second time. It's a good feeling to know that the buyer trusted you enough to come back to you.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm thinking of a compliment our team got from a publicly traded foreign company this past year on a transaction we did. And we loved the investment bankers on the other side. They were great people. And I think they did a great job with their client. But we got the comment afterwards that, we could not have gotten this deal done without Touchstone, that, your fairness, your diligence throughout, taking the time to understand all sides of the issue and then try to help diagram a solution, was really unparalleled. And we look forward to hiring you to do our deals going
That's
forward.
fabulous.
Which I don't want to take away from our friends, by the way, at this other investment bank who did a great job. But I think, when the other side is complimenting you on what a good job you did to manage a difficult deal. And, some of these are almost like giving birth to these deals. It's really hard. Some of them are a little bit, some of them go relatively easily, but some of them are.
I'm not sure. I think any
you're like
of
one
them,
out of 20.
like, I don't, maybe. They all have their own idiosyncrasies.
They definitely do. But there are patterns. There are
Yes.
patterns of personality type. There are patterns in terms of how a deal is going to go. Different sectors have different styles as to how the deal may be constructed or paid
Right.
for. And I think that's one of the advantages here. If you're a business owner, maybe you've had one or two other exits, but what you're an expert on is running your business. What we're an expert on is selling it, right? That's our business.
100%.
We've done it over 500 times. We've
Yeah.
seen all the movies before. We know how they all end.
Yeah.
And honestly, if it's something we haven't seen before, intellectually, it's like
We will figure it out.
fun, a surprise.
To say, can I do it this way?
That's right.
Yes, I can. So you are kind of king of that. You will sell a business that can't be sold.
I am the patron saint of businesses that are difficult to sell. Yes.
What keeps you going to get to that point? Like you keep going past the point that most of us would have stopped.
Oh, the Jeff makes all his money after every rational human would give up. Yes, that's me.
Yes.
Okay, so getting back, I think it sort of gets into personality type.
Mhm.
Somebody that chooses to do trading without a parachute, right, with no salary and take a job and like risk their job every single day is probably somebody who has confidence, maybe too much in their own capabilities, but also has an intellectual curiosity. Okay. And likes to do hard things. I think there's some of that for me. There's also an element of service, without getting into my background, I'm one of those people that wasn't supposed to live this long. And, when you do that, you sort of have to figure out why are you still here and what are you here to do? And one of the ways that I've come to terms with that is that, I'm here to serve, just like you're here to serve. And one of the big ways that I serve in life is through the medium of finance, right? It's the medium that allows me to serve people. And so I'm not going to say it's like pro bono work that we do, certainly, but
that's not the goal.
No. But, when we do work, there are times that we take on businesses that it might be easier to say, I don't think that we're the right fit for you. There are, you can't take on only impossible or mostly impossible businesses to sell. But I think there is a component of that is service oriented because there's only so much time that we have. So I think there is some of that. But also I think when somebody tells you, like we had a client this past year who had their business burned down.
Right.
And we sold them in 4 weeks.
Because we had to. Because
yes,
they needed
they
it.
We'd been at market for them. It'd been a really long transaction. A couple different buyers hadn't worked out. And he said, I feel sorry for me. And of course we did too. But I feel sorry for you because you and Joe worked so hard on this and it's not going to close. And I said, yes, it is. And we had a deal done in 4 weeks. Now, obviously it wasn't at the same price, but we had a deal and an exit for a gentleman who was 78 years old and needed to exit his business. It was time. So, I mean, what could be more satisfying than that when they tell you it couldn't be done and you get it done for them? That's a blessing in life.
It's always great when they come back and you find out that they are actually happy with it as well.
Yes.
That's kind of the warm, fuzzy feeling.
Yeah. I mean, we spent a lot of time typing emails, looking at spreadsheets, building sims, going through buyer lists, which is a huge differentiator for us, but to actually the human side's not to be lost.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. I think it's kind of a key area that Touchstone brings to our clients. So in a wrap-up conclusion, we do this every day. Let's say you weren't going to do this every day, and you weren't going to go back to trading because you didn't get any younger.
No, I'm not doing that.
So what career? What would be your career path?
Well, I have 3 screenplays that I want to write.
Okay.
Based on 3 people that I've met in my life. And I'm totally convinced that at least 2 of them are Oscar winners. So I do want to do that. If I had never lived the life that I lived, the alternative life that I think I would have lived, now you see it, because now we have phones and smartphones and,
right,
video logs and stuff. But I would have wanted to travel the world and be like a writer for National Geographic. I'm a really good writer.
Okay.
And I would have liked
a travel writer.
A travel writer, but really what I would have liked to use that to springboard on, and you can do it now, you couldn't really do it back then, is to go around kind of what you see people like Anthony Bourdain or people like that doing, where they go out and meet with people and they're in a country and they're doing something, but they're really understanding people's lives. I would like to write about people's lives, meet interesting people around the world and interview them and write about their lives.
Excellent. Well, I think I just helped you find your pre-retirement plan.
Yeah, very good. Maybe the post-retirement plan.
But don't wait too long. Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for coming today. I hope that our owners enjoyed getting to know you. And
me too.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks.